Personally, I wouldn't want to go back to micro-budget filmmaking, but I used to do a lot of that when I was starting out. And I remember it being fun, but also being very, very exhausting. It's a very viable option for young filmmakers just starting out. Just my one word of advice is, if you're writing a script, make sure you're not writing a script that exceeds the budget that you have on hand, or the lack of budget that you have. Because sometimes young filmmakers or young scriptwriters who haven't made a movie yet or haven't attempted to make a movie yet, they tend to get carried away with the script, tend to write movies that are bigger than what they have to spend. And this can be particularly tricky, especially if you don't have anything to spend. But yeah, when you say micro budget, that also includes no budget, and that usually entails borrowing equipment, getting actors to perform for free, getting everybody to work for free. It's not a bad way to start a filmmaking career. It's not a bad way to make a film. A lot of good movies, a lot of good films have been made under these conditions. It's a sort of filmmaking that a lot of young filmmakers should probably attempt, instead of waiting for that big budget to come landing. Instead of waiting for that big budget to land on their lap, I think they should venture out there, get their iPhones and get their friends or actor friends to work for free and shoot a film. It can be very, very liberating to be working on a small budget. Another advantage of working on a small budget is that it gives you creative freedom. There's a cliche, but it's a very, very real cliche, that the more money you spend, the more limited you are creatively. I've had the good fortune of not yet experiencing that, but I haven't really worked with budgets bigger than 4 million. So I'm still pretty much in the low budget filmmaking bracket. But yeah, when you have little to no budget at all, you can practically do whatever you want. So that's the one advantage. That's very liberating. And for young filmmakers starting out, trying to get their chops, that's a way to get a grasp of what your sensibility is. If you can shoot with no money and still come up with something, still find a way to get your vision on cam. That's one of the best, most fun ways to go about it. I always encourage young filmmakers to make films on their own. Because at some point in your life, there's a big chance that you're going to make movies for someone else. So start making films for yourself. Go out there and shoot. That doesn't necessarily translate to all kinds of material. Some screenplays demand a slightly bigger crew or a slightly more professionalized conditions. But for the most part, I encourage young filmmakers to just do it, because it's very much possible, and I don't understand what's keeping you. When you can shoot a film on your phone, there's really no excuse left. So if you really want to make a film, you should have been making films a long time ago, because the cameras are there at your disposal. It's very, very, everybody edits on a laptop these days. You can get editing software. It can be done. It's being done. So I don't really see any excuse why there's still filmmakers out there waiting for their big break. There's no such thing as a big break anymore these days. So yeah, I always encourage you to make your own films. Do it now. Make a lot of them. My own philosophy is filmography is more important than anything else. So if I get to make only 4 films in my lifetime, as long as all those 4 films I had the control that I wanted to make them, then 4 films it is. But I would imagine the more money you have to spend, like I said, I've only worked, the highest budget I've worked with was, I think 4 million or 3 million. Yeah, that's the highest I've worked with. It would be great if I had like 3 million more for each film. Extra days, extra budget for production design, all those things that you end, extra time, extra money for VFX and all that. But so in my head, more money, at least to a certain degree, gives me more flexibility. But I don't think I'm referring to like 100 million budgets or 30, 40 million studio budgets. When I say that, I'm just saying up until maybe 10 million of still independent money. So the conditions have to be still independent, but it gives you more money gives you more a bigger budget definitely gives you more flexibility, but a mega budget and working for a studio might not. I think we're very lucky in the Philippines because a lot of young filmmakers just coming out of school or young filmmakers who haven't made a film yet have all these options to finance their films locally. You have Cinemalaya, you have Q Cinema, and you have Cinema One, among many others. These grant-giving film festivals. You have To Farm, you have Cine Filipino. Used to be you only had Cinemalaya. Used to be you had none, but now you have all these possible avenues for financing your films. Your first films, particularly, those who are just coming out of film school or are just waiting for that big break. All you have to do is come up with a really, really kick-ass script, and then at some point, well, hopefully one of these festivals selects you for the slate. There's very differences between the festivals, except for Q Cinema. All these festivals eventually own your films. That's a huge consideration, but if you're making your first film, I think it's very viable as long as you get to make the film the way you want it, and hopefully the film gets traction outside of the festival and gives you some sort of leverage into making your next film, this time more or less on your own terms. I've had experience with Cinema One, I've had experience with Q Cinema. Q Cinema is the only film festival that gives you rights to your film. Cinema One owns my first feature, but in both cases we were pretty much left alone. So the creative freedom that they gave me, was more than I could ask for. Even the two mediums, even the 2 episodes I'm directing now for Astro Show in Malaysia, had total creative freedom. So I've been very fortunate in the 4 films that I've made that I haven't experienced interference from producers. But yeah, if you're starting out, you have all these choices, all these festivals to send your script to, and hopefully get your first film made. You also could get financing in other places, like if you feel you have a very, very viable project. There are project markets around the world that cater to first-time filmmakers. There are also project markets that cater to genre filmmakers. So there's all these project markets around the world, mostly connected to big film festivals, where you can send your project or your script or your project, and if it gets selected, you get to pitch it to potential investors from all over the world. So that's also one avenue for you to finance your film. which is why I've always stressed on upping your game every time. Just keep upping your game as scriptwriters, as filmmakers. Try to expand your vision of what you want your cinema to be. And I don't know how to impart that. I don't know how to turn that into a how-to. But that's the advice I give to anyone, to just up your game, write the best script you think you've written, and try to raise your standards to something. Raise the standards of your game, up your game closer to world class. There's no science to it. I think it's a matter of good luck. It's a confluence of good luck and watching films widely and perseverance, I suppose. But yeah, you have all these options to get your films financed, locally and internationally. Well, actually, that's the thing, because Cinemalaya, Cinema One, QC, and as far as I know, and all those other festivals, they're open to everyone. So even if you're a student, you can submit a script, and if it's good enough, you get to make a film. In 2016, I was part of Q Cinema Shorts. My first short film, actually, If You Leave, was part of the Q Cinema Shorts. One of the films that was part of the festival, one of the short films that was part of the festival, was something called Contestant Number 3. It was made by two filmmakers who were 16-year-olds who were still in high school. It's one of the best films of 2016, in my opinion. So that's one example of young, budding, not yet out of high school filmmakers who received the grant to make their first film. So there's really no excuse, or there's really no limits to who can join or who can get in, as long as you have the material as long as you have material that's good, that at least the selection committees of these festivals think is good enough to be made into a film. So there's that avenue. I think it's open to everyone. Aside from these, you have project markets where you can send your projects for pitching, where your projects can get selected and you get to pitch to a lot of potential investors from all over the world. There are a lot of project markets all over the world of different types, catering to different sorts of films or different sorts of filmmakers. There are project markets for first-time and second-time filmmakers. There are project markets for genre filmmakers. So you have this vast, you have all these options at your disposal. Of course, you can get private investors too. That's not unheard of. And if you can, then good for you. The two crucial things when you're starting out as a filmmaker and thinking of getting your funding through these means, I think the most crucial thing is to get the screenplay. The most crucial thing is to write a very, very good, very, very strong screenplay. And the second is to hook up with a producer. Producer is more valuable to you than you think. So those are the two essentials, I think. Write the film you want to make and write it well, and hook up with a producer who's willing to shepherd you to potential investors. Because even if you send your script to the festivals, the grant-giving festivals, at some point when they ask you to pitch, they're going to ask who your producer is. They're going to ask who your producer is, and you have to have one at the ready. So, yeah, it's not as hard as it seems. Of course, you can still do it DIY, and that's perfectly fine. If that's where your sensibilities lie, then go for it. But for those of you who want to make slightly more conventional films, then you have the festivals and the project markets. Just make sure you write a kick-ass script and make sure you get a good producer.